Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on diversity, how to make the most of your data. My name is Karen Sarai and I am a Diversity and Inclusion Officer at the SRA.
And my name is Tim Lipsley. I manage the Risk Analysis and Research team at the SRA, and I was involved in the development of the Diversity Data Viewer.
And we'll be presenting today's webinar jointly. As you are aware, all firms regulated by the SRA are required to collect, report and publish the diversity data of their workforce. Our aim for the webinar is to help you make the most of your diversity data. We will start off the webinar by looking at why diversity data is so important to us as a regulator. We will then look at why it matters for you, exploring some of the business benefits that diversity monitoring can bring to your firm. We will consider how you can use your data through sharing some examples of best practice that we have seen, along with introducing our new online diversity toolkit. At this point, I will hand over to Tim, who will demonstrate how this free tool can help you get more value out of your diversity data and show how the diversity of your workforce can best be used to your business advantage. And finally, we will provide an update on the reporting arrangements for this year. There will be opportunity for you to ask us questions at the end of our presentation. We will try our best to answer as many of these as is possible, and we will put all of the questions and our responses on our website after the webinar and would encourage you to look at these.
So why are we collecting diversity data on the legal workforce? We do recognise that this has created a lot of debate about the reason for this. For us, it remains a key element of our work around Principle 9 and forms an important part of our commitment to improving diversity in the legal services market. Unfortunately, barriers to entry and progression do still exist. 69% of partners in law firms are male. Around 1 in 3 of these partners went to private school. 2/3 of BME solicitors work as sole practitioners in 2 to 4 partner firms, and the average wage for female BME solicitors was £20,000 less than their white male counterparts. Furthermore, we know that women are known to be leaving their legal careers due to a lack of flexible working. As a regulator, we have a responsibility to try and address this. We've sometimes been asked about whether this represents the SRA's scope creeping beyond the regulation, the original remit of our regulation, but the Legal Services Act clearly gives us a remit to focus on encouraging a representative, independent and strong legal workforce. When we're considering changes to SRA policy, solicitors frequently remind us that we need to give proper consideration to the impact that change will have on the administration of justice and the ability of the criminal justice system to deliver the rule of law. It's really important that we think about these things because the legal services sector contributes to the criminal justice system, and that delivers huge benefits to society. It's also vital, though, that the legal workforce that delivers these benefits is representative of the population that it serves. Without that, that diminishes the societal benefits that the legal services sector delivers. And to take it a step further, we draw the judiciary from the legal workforce. So without a diverse legal workforce, we cannot have a truly diverse judiciary. It's really important as well to say this requirement on collecting data is not a first step towards us imposing diversity quotas or targets for law firms. We require firms to collect the diversity data because it allows us to understand the current position of the market and track change. I'm now going to pass over to Karen, who's going to explain some of the benefits that law firms can also get from collecting this data.
Thank you, Tim. Diversity monitoring is an important tool for assessing how well you are doing on equality, diversity and inclusion. It can help you to ensure that your policies and practices are fair, and it can help you to remove barriers so that employees have a better opportunity to reach their potential. It can give you the evidence that you need to make plans to attract and retain the best people from the widest talent pool, improve the productivity of staff who are more likely to stay with you if they can work flexibly, build your firm's reputation, identify and address any inequality, and avoid or manage risk. Publishing your diversity data will also help consumers understand your firm and may help attract future clients. Businesses that can demonstrate commitment to diversity and inclusive work practices show that they are well equipped to serve a diverse community. We do recognise that not all employees feel comfortable about providing their data. It is quite natural for people to be concerned about why their employer wants to collect diversity monitoring information from them and how the information will be used. There may be a lack of interest in the survey or some discomfort about disclosing the data because they do not trust colleagues or their firm to treat them fairly. Unless these concerns are addressed, your staff may be reluctant to get involved, and this leads to incomplete data which has little use. The more your staff feel that the information that they provide will be used to introduce positive changes around equality and promote an inclusive working environment, the more they will want to be involved. You'll need to provide them with assurances about confidentiality and how you are going to use the information. If staff still do not wish to provide their data, even after these assurances, it is important to remember that they do not have to provide the data if they do not want to. Through our work with firms, we have seen many examples of how the collection and use of diversity data has really worked well, and we'd like to highlight 3 of these today as an example of how you can make the most of your data. Firm A told us how they have used their data to attract and retain female staff. They changed their attitude toward flexible working and upgraded their IT to ensure that all staff could work remotely, including secretaries. This was made easier through introducing a paperless office. They revised their maternity scheme, offering a more generous option, and began to track whether employees remained with the firm after returning from maternity leave. They also changed their approach to learning and development so that there was a greater use of e-learning, which could also be accessed remotely. Firm B used their data to identify underrepresentation within the firm in terms of disability, ethnicity, and social mobility. And they now reserve 2 spaces on their student vacation scheme for applicants with disabilities, and a further 2 spaces for applicants from a BME background. These students are guaranteed an interview for a trainee solicitor position with the firm. They also work closely with local colleges and business schools to broaden their pool of applicants. And Firm C spoke of how having an increased focus on disability has resulted in an increased disclosure from applicants and staff around disability. They have made significant efforts around deaf awareness and were awarded the Deaf Law Quality Mark. They've also introduced a new process whereby anyone who says they have a disability is offered an additional meeting where specific issues can be discussed and addressed at an early stage. Learning from other similar firms in the market can really help drive success in your own business. Seeing how you compare in the market is a really great starting point, as it can help you to think about where you may be doing well and also where you could be doing better. To help you with this, we recently launched an online diversity toolkit. This is available on our website and is free for all firms to use. I will hand over to Tim now, who will introduce the toolkit further and provide a demonstration of its capabilities.
Right, so here is the landing page for the Law Firm Diversity Toolkit. So we're in possession of a really valuable data set about diversity in the legal services market. But one thing that firms have been telling us is that the way that we've been reporting it, which is just at aggregate level, isn't all that helpful for them understanding where their firm might fit against their peers and the other firms that they compete with. So what we've done is put the data into a toolkit which allows you to look at the data from all sorts of different angles and hopefully get a lot more value out of it. I'm going to click through now so you can see the diversity toolkit and give you a short demonstration. So I can hide all of these definition points which allow you just to understand some of the tabs and get a little bit more detail on them. So I'll hide all of that help. And the first thing I can do is start looking at the population of solicitors and law firm employees that I want to look at. So I can look at everyone if I select the All button, or I can look at just partners and equivalents. I can look at solicitors and other qualified lawyers, or I can look at other staff, which includes secretaries and administrative staff. But for this example, I'm going to start off by looking at all. The default setting is on age, but for the definition, but for the example I'd like to show you, I'm going to select ethnicity. But here you'll see all of the different diversity characteristics that we can look at in the tool. And then finally, this is showing me ethnicity across all firms. At the moment, I'd like to look more closely at London, but I could select any one of these regions to take a closer look at that. And if you scroll down, you can see all sorts of different characteristics that we can view, and we'll come back to some of those later. But for now, I'm just going to start off with locations and London. Okay, so the first thing that this shows us is that if we compare the overall average for the market and London, which is the red column, we can see that London is a more diverse workforce in general. We can see that the red columns for these BME groups are all larger than the blue columns, which represents the overall market. If I was to look at, say, the North East, here we can see that there's a far more prevalence of white solicitors in that, or white employees in those law firms. And the value of this for a law firm is that if you want to make a comparison about where you sit in the market and what your diversity data shows you about how your firm compares to other firms in your area, you can actually look at firms in your region and make a more sensible comparison. So a firm in the North East may look at itself and see that it, compared to its peers, it actually is far more diverse. But the picture for a firm in London may want to ask itself different questions, given it may with the same diversity profile of its own firm. So I think that provides a very useful starting point to actually making use of data which might be more relevant to your firm. And take another example now. I'm going to look at all again, so I'm going to leave that on the all section. I'm going to take a look at school for this example. So this is where people have been educated. And I'm going to take a look at the work type category and look at corporate, finance and intellectual property. And of all the work type categories, this is the best proxy for city firms. So here we can see that for city firms, corporate, financial and intellectual property, we have 23% of the staff in those firms that have attended a UK independent or fee-paying school. If we take a look at the population level and look at partner and equivalent, so the more senior levels of staff in those firms, we can see that we have a great increase to 39% of that workforce at that particular salary level or employment level are attending or were educated at UK independent and fee-paying schools. One of the reasons why I think this is worth firms just having a think about for themselves is that one of the issues highlighted in the Law Society's business case for diversity is the risks associated with groupthink, where you have decision makers that all come from the same background and have the same perspectives. And this is one of the risks that we face when you have a very undiverse selection of employees in a particular segment of the market. So it's not to say that that profile is wrong per se, but it does raise important starting point for you to ask questions about what does that mean for your firm, and is that the profile that is really right for you and is really beneficial to your business. Then we'll take a look at another example. Here we're going to look at the all selection of staff again. So this is all people working within the law firm. We're going to take a look at gender, and we're going to select by work type again, criminal. So this is firms that do a significant proportion of their work in criminal areas of law. And here we can see that female and male employees are fairly evenly split, 55% female, 45% male. But if we look at this again at the more senior salary levels, the more senior staff levels, we can see that that split changes massively. And just the point to make here is that this does show the value of being able to get into the nitty-gritty of the data rather than looking at aggregate level, because it shows that some issues which could represent a lack of diversity are hidden in the overall data but really stand out quite clearly when you look at it at this level. And then finally, we want to take a look at partner and equivalent. So I'm going to keep that on partner and equivalent for this example. I'm going to take a look at age. So that's the one at the top. And I'm going to then scroll down and I'm going to take a look at firm by size. So I'm going to start off by taking a look at the larger firms, those with 50 plus partners. So here what we can see is that compared to the average, which are the blue columns, those larger firms tend to have an overrepresentation of staff at the sort of 35 to 44-year-old age group and the 45 to 54. And just to contrast that, when we look at sole practitioners, where we can see an overrepresentation here at the older ends of the spectrum, the 55 to 64 and the 65 plus. So the point about diversity here is quite a practical one for businesses, and it shows the importance of succession planning for certain groups of firms, particularly sole practitioners, and that's an issue that our Risk Outlook has commented on over the last couple of years. We can also take a look at other characteristics, and we'll take a very quick look at gender in those BME firms, and this is something we mentioned earlier on. So we can see that in the smallest firms we have an overrepresentation of BME solicitors, and that raises some important questions for us as the regulator, and the question there is there something about career progression in the larger firms which is having a knock-on effect about people's decision about which firm they want to work in? So that's something that we need to take a look at and make sure that we're dealing with any barriers that may exist. I just want to quickly talk you through this section of the website as well. If you click on any of these sections, you'll see sections of our report on diversity, which allows you just to understand a little bit more detail about why we're doing this and how you can use it. Particularly useful one for you to take a look at is this one on questions. So what we have here are, and I said earlier that this isn't about looking at targets or quotas or anything like that. It's really about getting you in your firm to just have an intelligent debate about what this diversity profile really means for you. So just to help kick that off, we've put some suggestions about areas of questions that you might want to ask yourself. And these cover things like recruitment, retention and reward, development and progression, work-life balance and firm culture, because it's thinking about things like that in a sensible business-like way which is going to have a real impact on improving diversity in the profession, probably far more so than any blunt tools like quotas might have. You can also read about the statistical methods. You'll have noticed that there's no preferred not to say data in the charts that I've just showed you. The reason we took those out is because we want the data to be as clean and easy to use as possible for you. But rather than just deleting that, we made sure that we used a valid statistical approach, and the methods that we used to modelling that data is all explained here. Finally, you can go to a Q&A section, which is all the frequently asked questions that we've been picked up so far since we launched the toolkit. One that you might find really useful to take a look at is this one down here about where you can find general population statistics for your region. So some people have asked us, it would be very useful for them to make a comparison, not just between the other law firms, but also the population that lives and works around them. And if you click through on this link, you'll get to the Office of National Statistics website, which will give you a lot of that really useful data. So that helps you put this data in context. It might also tell you about the population that your law firm that makes up your client base. That might also help you think about how you derive some of the business benefits that Karen was talking about earlier. So that concludes the brief tour of the diversity toolkit, and we'll just continue on with explaining a few more things about our future plans for diversity and how we will be promoting this further.
Thank you, Tim. I hope that's shown exactly how the toolkit gives you an opportunity to really make use of your data once it has been collected. So we're going to look now at the arrangements for reporting your 2014-15 data to us. We have listened to the feedback received from firms about using the organisation diversity data reporting pages on My SRA in early 2014, and we do recognise that a number of firms have difficulty accessing and using the reporting pages. So we've been looking at ways to make it easier for firms to report the data through to us. We're in the process of making significant improvements to our IT systems, and until this work has been completed, we've decided to use an external provider to collect the data on our behalf. We'll now be discussing arrangements for this with a number of providers to ensure that the arrangements for reporting are easy for firms to use and secure. We anticipate that the period for reporting firm diversity data to the SRA will be 3 months from the beginning of April until the end of June, but we will be contacting each firm to advise when and how the firm diversity data will need to be reported. There is no change to the requirement for firms to collect and publish their firm diversity data annually. Firms may decide when to collect the diversity data from their staff each year, and there is no change to the diversity questionnaire used in 2013-14, which can be downloaded from our website. Information about the diversity data requirements are available on our website. We have also set up a dedicated mailbox to answer any questions relating to the requirements, so please do email us at diversity@sra.org.uk if you need any additional information or guidance. We hope that you found the information provided today helpful, and we'll now hand it over to you for any questions that you may have about today's presentation. We will try to respond to as many questions as possible during the time remaining, although any questions that we don't respond to today will be posted on our website with our response within the next few weeks.
We hope that you found the information provided today helpful. We'll now hand it over to you for any questions that you may have about today's presentation. We'll try to respond to as many questions as possible during the time remaining, although any questions that we don't respond to today will be posted on our website with our response within the next few weeks. So our first question that's come in is, doesn't reserving recruitment spaces for particular groups constitute positive discrimination, which I believe to be illegal? The exercise isn't about reserving spaces as such, but asking the right questions about perhaps why those groups may be underrepresented and what could possibly be done to try and address these.
Another question which has come in is whether it would have been of benefit to include the preferred not to say in the charts that we've just shown you in the toolkit. The reason why we did it like we did was primarily for ease of use. We thought it was best to have the data kit as clutter-free as possible. There is an argument to say that by having the preferred not to say there, you have an opportunity to encourage staff to respond preferred not, where you might need to be encouraging people to respond to the questions a bit more confidently. Just two things on that point. The first one was that the distribution of the preferred not to say responses were quite skewed and in quite an unusual pattern in some places, which indicated that they hadn't really been responded to in a way which indicated a genuine preference from the respondent not to answer the question. So we had some firms where there was data which had preferred not to say over a blanket range of responses. So we didn't feel that they were operating exactly like you would expect preferred not to say responses to do in a well-answered questionnaire. So that was one reason for taking them out, just because they weren't really working very well. And the second one is that we do still publish the main report, which is the raw data, which is on SRA reports on our website. So that's still available, and we're going to keep on making that available. But for the toolkit and for ease of use, we felt it was best to take it out of there.
We've had another question come in. Some people have attended public school under a state-funded scheme, such as a direct grant scheme. Which response should they give to which sort of school they attended? So that would still be recorded under the public school option.
Okay. One thing that we discussed on the webinar has been the questions that firms can ask themselves about what they should do if they review their own profile against the population and see differences which strike them as being unusual. Karen, do you want to talk us through a few of the more practical things that they might want to consider?
Well, we've had a lot of feedback from firms about how they've benefited from taking a closer look at the diversity agenda and how it's encouraged more open discussion and debate amongst their employees about the culture of the firm and potential problem areas. So the toolkit can really help highlight which areas might need looking at a bit more, such as recruitment, retention, development and progress, and work-life balance. And it could trigger questions about perhaps where you've advertised the vacancies, the types of schools, universities and colleges that you're in contact with, how you decide on initial salaries, the criteria for bonuses or pay increases, and whether flexible working is an option. And on our website, there are some examples of the type of things you could be asking yourself, and this can act as a useful starting point. It's really helped make some firms think about where they could perhaps do things differently to other firms. A number of regional firms, for example, have come to us and said that by doing things like offering more flexibility, it's really helped to draw in talented lawyers from large city firms who wanted to experience a different work culture, for example. We've had another question come in about, can you give any guidance on how to publish our data? Well, as you know, firms are still required to publish a summary of their workforce diversity data, and we do have a publication framework which provides detailed guidance about what firms need to consider at the point of publishing, and this is available on our website. So the requirement is that firms will publish an anonymous summary of their workforce data annually at a time that is convenient for them. Diversity categories of sexual orientation and religion or belief are exempt from the publication requirement, although they do still need to be collected by the firm and reported to us. And at all times, we do ask firms to make sure that they're compliant with the data protection legislation when publishing their data, because the publication requirement doesn't override the data protection legislation. So firms do need to be careful not to publish data that might identify individuals within their firm. For more guidance, the Information Commissioner's Office's website has some useful advice on this, and we've also got details and links to this on our website. But firms are really at their own discretion in terms of how they decide they want to publish the data and when they wish to do so, and we don't have a prescribed format that they do need to follow. Obviously, with smaller firms, they might find that they're not actually able to publish their data without the risk of identification. And in those circumstances, we're not expecting them to comply with the publication requirement. So it's really down to firms to make their own decision about the risks involved and record their reasons for not publishing data if they decide that they can't.
Okay, a couple of really good questions here. One asking, it would be useful to be able to filter by both location and work type at the same time. Is it likely in the future we can analyse data by more than one of the filters? And another similar question about the presentation of data. Would it be possible to have a separate location filter for multi-office? Location filter of multi-office, as it stands, London data in particular may be skewed. What we're going to do with all of these types of responses is put them into a review that we're going to carry out after 4 to 6 months of this toolkit being in operation to work out exactly what it is that people want to have to be able to make more use of this tool. Other good suggestions that we had when we were piloting and testing this was to actually have Office for National Statistics data available within the tool, so you could not just compare against other firms, but also compare against the population around you. So what we're going to do is really evaluate how people are using this, what people want, and make sure that we develop the tool as time goes on to make it as functional as possible. One of the reasons why we haven't pursued those things at this point up until the launch is that we felt that the onus was really on us to put our data back out there as best we could so people could start making use of it, rather than sort of hold on to it and wait until we had it in the most perfect format. Another reason behind that is the fact that we've done this data modelling on the statistics to try and present the data in the most user-friendly way. And when you start breaking it down into different variables with multivariables layered on top of each other, it gets more reliable to use those statistical techniques. But as we get the preferred not to say responses starting to match a more normal distribution, hopefully when people see us using this data in a positive way and not using it in a way which is to take regulatory action, they'll have more confidence in providing their responses in the future. So we think there's a learning curve both for firms, hopefully in terms of their confidence to answer, so preferred not to say aloud goes down, and that allows us to do more interesting things with the data, but also for us in terms of researching how you want to use it so we can make the tool work better for you.
We've had another question come in which says, given that the SRA data collection exercise has been pushed out to April, does that mean we can wait until then to collect our data? We last collected it in January 2014. Yeah, you're entirely welcome to wait until April if you'd like, but what we're advising firms is if they do want to collect in the meantime, also they're more than welcome to do that. It will just give you a head start in terms of when the reporting window is opened, and because the questionnaire hasn't changed from last year, you're in a position to start collecting now if you would like to.
Another good question has come in, which is asking whether trainee data could be broken out separately in the future. At the moment, that's a really interesting thing, and we would like to do more with the data that we hold on various other parts of the profession, particularly including trainees, because as you say, it is a really vital area for us to make sure we're understanding the diversity characteristics. At At the moment, we don't have any immediate plans, but it's certainly on our radar as something we want to discuss and consider doing in the future. And I think you're really right to raise it as a good question.
Another question, if a firm does not respond to the diversity questionnaire, is there any sanction that is or could be imposed on a firm? In terms of what we did last year, those firms that repeatedly didn't report their data through to us, they were referred to our supervision unit, and yes, enforcement action was taken with those firms that repeatedly refused to report to the SRA. But in terms of the relationship that we're trying to have with firms, there was an ongoing discussion to try and get them to report in a friendly way. So yes, there will be implications if, of course, firms repeatedly do not report to us. But at the moment, our enforcement strategy is still being discussed.
One of the questions that we also had was about why firms can't see their own diversity data within the model, and some people suggested that they would like to be able to see the data for their firm alongside the data that we're presenting in the toolkit. The reason why we didn't do that was that, one, it would have involved a lot of extra functionality within the system to allow firms to bring up their own data. So again, we wanted to check that that was something that was really needed before spending the resource to actually build that into it. The second one is that we felt that if you were getting to the point where you would start making data available at the individual firm level, that would bring with it lots of data protection issues that we felt were better to put on hold for the moment and not go into that unless it was something that there was an extremely strong demand for. So at the moment, we don't have any plans to build that in, but the review that I suggested that we'll carry out of this is something that we'll bear that in mind when we get to that point as well.
Another question that's come in, are there plans to create an online portal that we can direct employees to so that they can fill in the data using a unique login and the website collates the report for the SRA? The firm sends the report on rather than using a paper format, which employees may be unwilling to complete and is time consuming for a firm to collate the data. At present, there are no plans to go down that route at the moment, but of course we're more than happy to take on your feedback and just invite your comments on perhaps future direction of travel. So thank you for that.
One of the questions as well has been, are we going to monitor who's using the tool and use that as part of our regulatory toolkit? The answer to that is no. There are various Google Analytics we could use to see how it's being used and who by, but we felt that at the individual firm level, really, we're encouraging firms to take a responsible approach, use it out of their own interest, use it out of their own business requirements, but it's not something that we're going to be tracking at an individual firm level whatsoever.
And how about STAR practices, Tim? How do you think the toolkit will benefit those firms in particular?
Yeah, it's a really good question. For smaller firms, I think the value of looking at statistics becomes a lot less relevant in terms of how you can apply that to your firm. Obviously, you still have the same questions about recruitment when you're going through any activity like that, but in terms of the actual makeup of the firm, the data starts having a very different context within a small firm. So we completely appreciate that. I think the relevance to small firms in general is probably two areas. One is it's really useful to see how the rest of the market's operating. Some of the quotes from firms have explained how some sectors of the market don't value talent properly, and their culture perhaps doesn't allow talent to stay in those parts of the market, and that's allowed them to recruit staff that otherwise would have been outside of their reach, perhaps. So that's been one thing. You can understand where there might be weaknesses in the market that you can really take advantage from. And then the other one is simply the questions there about recruitment, culture, still have a good degree of relevance even to smaller firms. So we'd suggest that use it in the way which is right for you. We're not prescribing any particular way that firms have to use this, but hopefully it still has some really useful information in there for you.
And another question we've had is that we have a Scotland and Belfast office. Are we okay to publish our data including these offices, or should we only be publishing for our England and Wales population? As I've said, really, the publication requirement is quite at the firm's discretion in terms of how they exactly choose to publish. Have a look on our website for some guidelines. There's a publication framework on there. But yeah, it's entirely up to you how you decide to publish your workforce summary.
Another question has just come in which relates to when the 2015 data comes in, will we be putting in year-on-year comparisons so historical data will start to build up over time? At the moment, we don't have a sort of definite fact plan on that. It's another thing that I would say we'll put into that evaluation about how many people want it, how user-friendly that will be. My feeling at the moment is perhaps that we need a bit of a time series to build up before that starts to have some real value. But particularly within those management information reports that we have on our website, that's a good place where you can see that data building up over time already. We don't want to make this toolkit too cluttered with information, which might take away from its usability, user-friendliness. But yeah, it's something we're going to keep a close eye on about how we can make that available. And it could be that we build that extra functionality into a later date as that data set gets better. And that is also fundamentally why we're doing it, to see how profiles are changing over time, and is it changing fast enough? That's the kind of thing we report in our risk outlook, why these trends are persistent and what difference is being made, what that tells. If trends are very slow to change, what does that tell us about the amount of resource that we need to keep on putting into this to make sure that we are having the impact that we need to have? So yeah, it's a really important piece of information, and although we don't have a definite plan at the moment, it's one of those things that I thought will be very relevant and will be discussed one way or the other.
It's a really helpful suggestion. And Tim, how can people provide more feedback on the toolkit if they'd like to?
Yeah, at the moment, if you go into the how to provide feedback on the toolkit in the FAQs, which is down at the left-hand side of the screen, or when you go into the data viewer, you can click on a contact us page there. We'll keep on providing any feedback as you get to grips with this. We've given you a quick tour at just now, but if when you've had a play around with it at your leisure and you've got more ideas, submit your ideas through on that, and in time we'll put out a more formal way which people can respond to particular questions on the website to give us a more detailed piece of feedback. And as we'll be out on the road at various events talking about risk or talking about equality and diversity over the course of the year, and there'll be chances then for us to get feedback one-on-one with people as well.
A further question is, I've already entered this year's data onto my SRA. Will I have to provide it again to the external provider? Well, hopefully those firms that have already entered their data won't have to do so again, and we are hoping that we can get the arrangements in place with the external provider quite soon, and this is one of the things that we are keen to discuss with them.
Well, at the moment, I think that's covered all of the questions that we've been asked, so I think that is probably a convenient time to wrap up the Q&A session.
Thank you for all of your questions today. Any questions that we weren't able to answer during the webinar, we will post them on our website within the next few weeks. But that ends our webinar for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.